the best beer I have ever made. Hello and welcome back to my brew garage. Today we're going to be brewing up a SMaSH New England IPA. Super excited for this one just because I've never brewed a SMaSH beer before. In fact, I just recently learned about them. And if you're not familiar with them, it's SMaSH because it's single malt and single hop. So these beers are meant to kind of show off the type of malt that you use, the hop that you use, so that way you can kind of get an idea of where certain flavors are coming from for future brews. Or of course just to showcase that one malt or that one hop style. So for today's brew, here's what we have cooking. Our single malt for this brew consists of 13 pounds of Maris Otter. Our single hop will be my all-time favorite, Mosaic. For today's brew, we're using an all-grain propane system. For any of these items, feel free to look in the description below. The first step in our brew day is to mill those 13 pounds of Maris Otter. For today's brew, we are looking to mash in at 152 degrees Fahrenheit. We fill up our brew kettle with 4.9 gallons of water. And in order to achieve that temperature, we are looking to heat this strike water up to 162 degrees Fahrenheit. Since today's beer is a New England IPA, water salts are a must. We are going to be adding in a chloride to sulfate ratio of 2 to 1. That way it will give the beer a nice soft sort of mouthfeel and help accentuate more of the malt characteristics rather than the bitterness. We'll let this finish heating up and get it into our mash. With our strike water at temperature, we're going to go ahead and mash in. We'll start by filling this up, and as it fills up, we'll dump in our grains. Before we cap this, we're going to go ahead and stir everything in, make sure we don't have any dough balls. Any dough balls that you have in there will of course reduce your efficiency. Those are just dry parts in the mash. Once everything is mixed in real good, we'll go ahead and put the lid on and start our 60-minute timer. While we wait for our mash to finish, I filled up the kettle with 4.75 gallons of water. We're going to heat this up to 168 degrees for our fly sparge. To keep our water profile consistent, we will add our water salts to the kettle for the sparge. As always, 10 minutes into our mash, we'll take a pH reading. Our goal is to be within 5.2 to 5.4. Looks like we're at 5.5. That is close enough for today's mash. We'll go ahead and leave it as is. While we wait for the mash to finish, now's as good a time as any to get yourselves a beer. Today's beer is the Floater IPA, and just check that out. Beautiful color, beautiful head retention, and some wonderfully citrus notes that, thanks to the Imperial A24 yeast, this guy's got. In fact, this beer that we're brewing today, we're also going to be using Imperial A24, and it's the yeast that we collected from this beer. If you guys want to see a video on that in the future, how to make a yeast starter and collect yeast from a fermentation, just let me know. Otherwise, enjoy. With our 60-minute mash finished, we are now taking our wort. The sparge container is putting some water gently on top of the grain bed, while we also collect wort into the kettle to get ready for boil. For today's brew, I'm really excited to try out a new device. This here reads gravity, but it's calibrated to 155 degrees. So it's meant for when you're actually done with your mash and you're putting the wort into the kettle. We're gonna go ahead and put this in the kettle as it fills up, so that way we can watch the gravity and make sure we hit our numbers precisely. Now that we are at a boil, I've turned down the heat and we're adding our first hop addition, 1/2 ounce of Mosaic. Here is our 30-minute addition, 1/2 ounce of Mosaic. With 15 minutes left in our boil, we're gonna go ahead and open up this valve and start our pump, so that way we can sanitize the wort chiller. We'll add our 10-minute hop addition, 1 ounce of Mosaic. We are now at the end of our boil for 60 minutes. We're now going to cool this wort down to 170 degrees before we put in our final hop addition of 1 ounce of Mosaic. Let's start cooling. While our wort cools down to 170 degrees, we're also rerouting some of that nice hot water being used to chill into our fermenter with some star sand. So that way we can sanitize everything and recycle some of the water. I tell you what, that plate chiller is quick. Only a few minutes have gone by and we're already at 170 degrees, which means we pitch in our final hop addition, 1 ounce of Mosaic. With our final hop addition in there, we're gonna let it sit for 15 minutes at 170 degrees Fahrenheit before we chill this down and then put it into our fermenter to get it ready for yeast and a cool little contraption I'm gonna show you for dry hopping. Since this is a New England IPA, we wanna limit as much oxygen exposure as possible in the process. So we're actually gonna set up something that means we don't have to open up the fermenter at all during the process. All right, our brew day is nearly done. I promised you I'd show you the contraption I've come up with for dry hopping so that we don't have to open the container. Inside of each one of these canisters is 2 ounces of Mosaic hops, as well as a sous vide magnet. On the other side is another magnet that's holding these in place so that when I'm ready to add them to the beer, I can simply just pull the magnet and it will drop into the beer. From there, we're gonna go ahead and pitch our yeast. This is our yeast starter of Imperial A24 Dry Hop. We'll give that just a bit of a stir. Get all the yeast mixed into the solution. And we'll just pour it on in. We've also added a tilt hydrometer in there, so that way we can keep track of the beer without having to open up the container. We'll go ahead and place our lid on there nice and carefully, hopefully keeping those canisters on top. Very good. And then we've got our cold crash guardian. We will go ahead and toss that on as well. There we go. Brew day is concluded. We'll come back to it once fermentation has finished and show you the finished product. Welcome to the tasting of the Mosaic Otter Splash, or should I say SMaSH, New England IPA. Let's take a look at how this thing turned out. Wonderfully hazy, just as we would hope for in a New England IPA. Going for some smell. Oh, some wonderfully citrus notes from that Mosaic hop. One of my all-time favorite hops. Just, you can't go wrong with it. The more you use, the better a beer gets, it seems like. We'll go in for the taste. I am not exaggerating when I say that is probably the best beer I have ever made. Like, oh, that is good. Like, seriously, in the 10 years I have been brewing, never have I made a beer that was this good. Just fruity, it's soft, just a wonderfully soft mouthfeel, and just like looking at my notes, this is a 7.61% beer. Never would I have imagined that it was that high in alcohol content. This will not be in the keg for long. Let's just say that. But anyway, I digress. Let's go into some of the notes on this beer. It started out at a gravity of 1.058. It finished at a solid just 1.000, which of course, as I said, leads to a 7.61% alcohol content in the beer. 2 days into fermentation, I put in 2 ounces of Mosaic for dry hopping. That way we got some of the biotransformation during that fermentation process. And then 2 days before we bottled, I put in another 2 ounces of hops. Now, in order to do all this and avoid any oxidation in that cold side of fermenting, cold side oxidation, I should say, I ended up attaching some vessels with the 2 ounces of hops each to the top of the fermenter. If you'd like to see how I did that, just click the link above here, and that will show you kind of my process for dry hopping while in a fermenter that has a nice wide lid. And that made this perfect. The other thing that I did too is I transferred to the keg using a no oxygen transfer option, which if you click this link will also show you how I do that. But all of that being said, this is seriously, just brew this beer 100%. And if you do, please leave me a comment on what you think or if you tried something different. But cheers. I'm going to just go drink this.